3 signs it's not chemistry, it's trauma. There is a dangerous kind of attraction that does not feel like peace. It feels like urgency, like emotional gravity, and like your nervous system has mistaken familiarity for destiny. Most people never question it. They call it chemistry, they call it passion, and they call it the strongest connection they've ever felt. But sometimes what feels magnetic is not love. Sometimes it is an old wound recognizing its favorite hiding place. A pattern dressed as fate. A survival response wearing the perfume of romance. Because the human mind is not only drawn toward what is good, it is drawn toward what is familiar even if what is familiar once hurt you. Especially if it hurt you. And this is one of the hardest truths to accept. Not every intense connection is sacred. Some connections feel powerful precisely because they reactivate unfinished pain. That is why some people can spend years chasing relationships that leave them emotionally starving while still believing they have found their person. The body confuses emotional unpredictability with aliveness. The soul confuses longing with meaning. And eventually, a person can become addicted to emotional turbulence while calling it intimacy. So how do you know the difference? How do you recognize when a connection is rooted in truth, and when it is rooted in trauma? There are signs, not obvious signs, and not the kind social media usually talks about. But quiet signs, psychological signs, and spiritual signs. And once you see them clearly, you may never look at attraction the same way again. And the first way to recognize whether this connection is rooted in truth or rooted in trauma is hidden in the state of your nervous system. Because the first sign it's not chemistry, it's trauma, is that you feel more anxious than grounded. The second sign is that the connection makes you feel compelled to prove your worth. And the third sign is even quieter, but far more dangerous. The relationship slowly makes you lose yourself. Each of these signs reveals a deeper psychological pattern beneath attraction, attachment, and emotional survival. Sign 1. You feel more anxious than grounded. Real chemistry creates openness, trauma chemistry creates hypervigilance. At first, they can feel almost identical. Both create intensity, both create obsession, and both can consume your thoughts. But beneath the surface, the emotional architecture is completely different. Healthy connection expands the nervous system, trauma-based attraction destabilizes it. You replay conversations constantly, you monitor tone shifts, and you become emotionally dependent on small signals. A delayed text changes your mood. One moment of warmth feels euphoric. One moment of distance feels catastrophic. And slowly your inner world begins orbiting another person's unpredictability. This is not usually because you are too emotional. It is because the body remembers inconsistency. Especially if love in your early life was connected to emotional unpredictability. Affection that appeared and disappeared, care mixed with criticism, and warmth followed by withdrawal. The nervous system adapts to these environments by becoming alert. Scanning, interpreting, and trying to earn safety instead of simply receiving it. And later in life, calm can feel unfamiliar, even suspicious. A peaceful relationship may seem boring. Not because it lacks depth, but because the body has associated emotional instability with importance. So when someone finally offers consistency, part of you may not trust it. The ancient writings often described wisdom not as noise, but as stillness. Not as emotional chaos, but as rootedness. Like a tree planted near water that does not panic every time the season changes. Real connection does not require constant emotional survival. You should not need to decode someone in order to feel loved. And this is the paradox many people eventually face. The relationship that heals you may not feel as intoxicating as the relationship that wounded you. Because healing rarely announces itself with fireworks. Sometimes it arrives quietly, like rest, and like exhaling after years of holding your breath. But anxiety is only the beginning. Over time, trauma chemistry starts reshaping how you see yourself. You stop asking whether the relationship is healthy and start wondering whether you are enough to keep it. And that leads directly into the second sign: it's not chemistry, it's trauma. You feel compelled to prove your worth. Sign 2, you feel compelled to prove your worth. Trauma chemistry often turns connection into performance. You stop asking whether the relationship is healthy, and start asking whether you are enough to keep it. This changes everything. You overanalyze your value, you shape-shift, and you become more accommodating, more impressive, more useful, and more emotionally available than the other person. Not because authenticity disappeared, but because survival entered the room. At the core of many trauma bonds is an unconscious belief. If I can finally make this person choose me, maybe I will finally feel chosen. But this pursuit becomes endless. Because unresolved wounds are rarely satisfied by external validation. The hunger simply changes shape. You begin sacrificing your instincts to preserve the connection. Ignoring discomfort, explaining away disrespect, and calling emotional neglect complexity. And eventually you become disconnected from your own inner authority. This is one of the clearest signs that the relationship is feeding an old wound rather than nurturing your life. True intimacy does not require self-abandonment. You do not need to audition for love that is aligned. The soul was not designed to survive on crumbs while calling it a feast. And yet many people remain trapped here because intermittent affection is psychologically powerful. When warmth is inconsistent, the mind clings harder. The reward becomes unpredictable. And unpredictable rewards create some of the strongest emotional addictions known to human behavior. Casinos understand this, social media understands this, and wounded relationships often operate the same way. You keep hoping the next emotional high will finally stabilize the pain, but instability cannot heal instability. A river cannot cleanse itself with more mud. At some point, a person must ask a terrifying question. What if the connection feels deep because it activates my wounds, not because it honors my soul? That question changes people because it forces them to separate longing from truth. And those are not always the same thing. And when a relationship constantly demands performance, self-abandonment eventually follows. Little by little, your identity begins dissolving beneath the pressure of keeping the connection alive. Which leads to the third sign: it's not chemistry, it's trauma. The relationship slowly makes you lose yourself. Sign 3. The relationship makes you lose yourself. One of the most overlooked signs of trauma chemistry is identity erosion. You become less connected to your own center, less clear and less grounded. Your emotional life becomes reactive instead of intentional. The relationship slowly consumes your internal landscape. You stop creating, stop reflecting, and stop listening to yourself. Your world narrows, and without realizing it, you begin abandoning the very parts of yourself that once made you feel alive. This often happens gradually, not dramatically. Like fog entering a room. You wake up one day emotionally exhausted, spiritually fragmented, and unable to remember who you were before the connection began. But healthy love does not erase identity, it clarifies it. Real connection should deepen your relationship with truth, not pull you away from it. Ancient wisdom traditions often warned against gaining the entire world while losing the self. Because external attachment without inner rootedness eventually becomes a form of spiritual starvation. A person can be deeply desired and still profoundly disconnected from their own soul. And this is where many people confuse emotional merging with intimacy. But losing boundaries is not the same as becoming close. Constant emotional enmeshment is not evidence of destiny. Sometimes it is evidence that two unhealed nervous systems are trying to regulate through each other. That is why some relationships feel impossible to leave even when they are clearly destructive. The connection is not only emotional, it becomes physiological. The body begins craving relief from the very stress the relationship creates. And this cycle can continue for years. Not because people are weak, but because unresolved pain is persuasive. It speaks in the language of urgency, and it convinces you that suffering is depth. That emotional exhaustion is devotion. That losing yourself is proof of love. But love that requires your disappearance is not love in its highest form. Anything sacred should move you closer to wholeness, closer to honesty, and closer to inner alignment. Not further away. But these signs are not random. They all point towards something deeper happening beneath the surface of attraction itself. Because the deeper truth about trauma chemistry is that it often reveals unresolved emotional history we have not fully faced.